All right, 1/6a, multiplying real numbers. I just have 2 rules for you to follow. Yeah, Olivia. No, but I'll give them back to you after we do the lesson today. Okay, so 1/6a is multiplying real numbers. There are 2 rules for this. The first says the product, that means multiplication, right? The product of 2 numbers with the same sign. Do you know what I mean by the same sign? What's a sign? Plus the positive or the negative, right? So 2 positive numbers added together, or multiplied, sorry, adding was the last time. 2 positive numbers multiplied or 2 negative numbers multiplied, okay? So if they have the same sign, we would say the product of those 2 numbers is positive. Okay, so if you're multiplying, right, product, 2 numbers with the same sign, your answer is always positive. That means a negative times a negative is a positive, and a positive times a positive is a positive. Okay, so it would be like 3 times 4 is 12, right? But -3 times -4 is still a positive 12. Okay, so multiplying 2 negatives or multiplying 2 positives, you're going to get a positive. That's the first rule. The second rule says this: the product of 2 numbers with different signs is, what do you think? If I multiply 2 numbers with different signs, I'm going to get what kind of number? A negative. Okay, so like same setup for a problem here. If I do -3 times 4, okay, so one's positive, one's negative, my answer is going to be negative. Or if I do 3 times a -4, my answer again is going to be negative. Okay, so if they have different signs, negative. If they have the same sign, positive. So we're just going to do a little bit of that and then a little bit of square root stuff just to make sure everyone's clear on how that works. And then we'll be done. So it's a pretty short lesson today. All right, so example 1 here. I'm going to give you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different problems. And we're going to see what we get. So the first one, 6 times a -15. First of all, is your answer, without plugging it into a calculator, you should be able to tell me right now, is your answer going to be positive or negative? Negative. It's going to be negative because you're multiplying 1 positive and 1 negative, okay? Then your job is figure out what 6 times 15 is. And if you can't do that in your head, you can do it on your calculator or just count by 15s, right? 15, 30, 45, 60, 75, 90, okay? So 6 times a -15 is a -90. How about -7/10 times 3/5? Okay, so first thing I want to know, is my answer going to be positive or negative? Negative. It's going to be negative, right? Because you have one of each. So put your negative in right away. What's different about multiplying fractions than adding fractions? Katie, what are you doing? Because they're all watching you right now. On the picture?
On these pictures. On my photos.
Oh, yeah, put those away. Because they're all watching you instead of doing math. What do you do with multiplying fractions that's different than adding or subtracting fractions? you can cross cancel, but not cross multiply, right? Cross multiplying is if you set up a proportion, which we will get to this year. What do you do to multiply fractions? What? Do you need a common denominator? No, okay? When you're adding, you need a common denominator. When you're multiplying, you do not, okay? You just get to multiply straight across. So we're gonna multiply here. What do you get there? That's a negative 21, right? We're gonna leave the negative out in front and put the 21 here. A lot of times people ask me, where should that negative go? Does it go at the top? Does it go at the bottom? It doesn't matter. Just don't put it with both, okay? If you put it with both, you're saying a negative 7 and a negative 10, which is actually a positive 7/10, and this is supposed to be a negative 7/10. So when you have that negative, just make sure it's only with one set of your numbers, okay? Okay, then what do I do for my bottom numbers? You're gonna multiply the 10 times the 5, which is 50, okay? So your answer is negative 21 over 50. Now, if you can reduce your fractions, reduce them. But negative 21 over 50, you can't reduce. So we're just gonna leave it at that, okay? You good? Okay, next one. What is negative 4 times negative 8? Is your answer gonna be positive or negative?
Positive.
It's gonna be positive because you're multiplying two of the same sign, right? So it's gonna be a positive, and 8 times 4 is 32. What about this one? So this one looks a little different, right? It's a negative 6 squared. Notice your negative 6 is in parentheses. So basically what they're saying is this, negative 6 times negative 6. Positive, right? If you have two of the same sign, it's going to be positive. So this is 36. Okay, here's what I want you to see because this gets done so often. So often done wrong. A negative 6 squared versus a negative 6 squared. Okay? Notice what's happening. You have negative 6 in parentheses and we're squaring it. That means you are taking negative 6 times negative 6, okay? Versus the one right below it is saying the opposite of 6 squared, which would be the opposite of 6 times 6. Okay, so that one you're multiplying and then taking the opposite of it. So if the negative is not in parentheses, the negative is gonna stick around. If the negative is in parentheses, negative 6 times negative 6 is now positive 36. Does that make sense? I see that done wrong maybe more than anything else. Probably not, but it feels like that gets done wrong a lot. So just make sure you're clear on that. Questions on that? All right, last one of these, and then we have one more type of problem we're gonna look through. What is 24 times 0.5? Positive or negative?
Negative.
Positive. When you multiply two positives, you get a positive, right? 24 times 0.5, what is that saying? Half, right? 0.5, half of 24 is what?
Mom, I'm killing you.
Who is it? Your mom?
Leonardo.
You good? Did you turn it off? Good? Okay, let's try this again. Half of 24 is what? Half of 24 is 12, and it's gonna be positive because they're both positive. Okay? Okay, now we're gonna throw a few square roots into the mix. All right, so let's say for this first one, we have this, okay? Just like if there's the parentheses situation, my negative right now is basically telling me the opposite of something, okay? So this is saying the opposite of the square root of 25. Do you know what the square root of 25 is? It's 5, okay? So if I'm saying the opposite of 5, I'm saying negative 5, okay? Notice there are no parentheses, right? But that negative is still telling you it's the opposite of your expression, okay? All right, second one here. Have you ever seen this setup before? Where you have that plus and minus sign there? It doesn't mean the bottom's negative and the top's positive, but I can see why you would think that because of how it's set up. This plus and minus is telling me that my answer is the positive answer and the negative answer. But rather than have to write two answers, you can write plus and minus and then your one answer, okay? So if we think about how this is set up, my answer is going to be the positive and negative square root of 4 over 49. What is the square root of 4 over 49? 2 over 7, okay? So your answer here is essentially saying, so you may write it like that every time. Essentially what you're saying is my answer is 2/7 and negative 2/7, okay? But rather than have to write all of that, you can just do the plus or minus and then 2/7, okay? Yeah.
When we receive these like type of questions on the test, what do we have to do?
Right, yeah. So I'll give you a problem where, so like this first one, right? I just said I want the opposite. I want the negative answer for this. Whereas this is the positive and negative answer. Because here's the thing with square root. If I say the square root of 9, okay, is 3. But it's also negative 3 because I could do negative 3 times negative 3 and I get a positive 9, right? So you get a positive version and a negative version when you square root. So if I give you this, I'm saying I just want the negative answer. I just want negative 5. Whereas if I tell you I want the positive or negative, both of those work, the positive 2/7 and the negative 2/7. Because a square root, right, is saying what can I multiply by itself to get that number under the radical? Well, if I do negative 2/7 times negative 2/7, I'm going to get negative 2 times negative 2 is a positive 4, and 7 times 7 is 49. So I'm getting this with negatives, or I'm getting that with positives. Does that make sense? So it's saying, here's both my answers. The positive is true and the negative is true. Okay? All right. What if I just give you this? Okay, for now, if I'm not specifying positive or negative, what do you think the assumption is here? Positive, okay? If there is no negative written in and it's not positive and negative written in, you assume it's the positive, okay? So the square root of 64 is 8, okay? How about this one then? If I say the opposite of the square root of 121, it's negative. And that's 11. So negative 11 is going to be our answer there. Okay? Any questions on those? All right.